Welcome to the Moon Baby Magic Podcast, a space to honor women's rites of passage stories. From menarche to menopause, the initiations of womanhood all live within our wombs. We are here to reclaim the sacredness of all of them. I'm your host, Natalie Elliott, birth keeper and women's coach specializing in womb wellness and hormonal healing. Ready for slow and sacred storytelling? Let's dive in. Welcome back to the Moon Baby Magic Podcast. Well, I can't believe it, but today is the last podcast episode of this first season. I wasn't sure when I initially began if I was going to do seasons, but it feels really right and just in alignment with the way I live my life and the way I encourage other women to live their lives to slow down with the winter season. So the podcast after this week, as Saturday is winter solstice, will be going on winter break, and we will be back mid-March when spring returns and rebirth comes to the earth and to the Moon Baby Magic podcast. Yeah, it's just so beautiful to live this way. I just sent a newsletter out this week, and you can get on my newsletter list in the show notes under the Womb Cycles playlist, and you'll also get my playlist for each phase of the cycle with that. About just like winter do's and don'ts and how it's so important to honor menstruation in winter because, it's the double, menstruation, inner winter and outer winter. So I encourage you to see how you can slow down this season. I know sometimes at the holidays that can be challenging, but we've got a whole other couple months after that to really practice turning in and going into that fertile darkness to see what wants to be born again come spring. And we can't do that if we try to keep up such a fast pace. Yeah, and if you'd like some support and to stay connected while the podcast is on winter break, you can join us in the Cyclical Living Circle. That's my membership where I've really been devoting a lot of my energy. I'm so grateful I created this before winter because it's kind of just this really sweet space where we can connect without, needing to like launch some big program. It's an accessible rate. It's $13 a month. Or you can pay $111 a year and get a little bit of a discount there. We've got like 6 or 7 women in there right now, and my hope is to have at least 13 because that's just such a sacred number for women. So yeah, we're doing a book club with reading books like Wild Power to learn the face of the cycle and the archetypes and how to live in right relationship, and having calls to discuss that. We're doing yoni steam ceremonies. We have our flagship call on the 13th of every month that always has tears and laughter and connection. And it's just really our women's circle call. We just had one on the mother wound, which was really deep and beautiful. And women are in there sharing recipes, asking, recommendations for things, connecting on, what to do on the first day of their cycle. And it's just been a really sweet place. So if you do want to stay connected, that's the best place to do so. You can also follow me on Instagram. All of these links are in the show notes. And if you have something in specific, I don't often talk about this, but I do virtual sessions for just working one-on-one with women to heal any sort of hormonal imbalance, fertility challenge, period pain, any sort of thing in that realm under the guidance of my mentor, Kristen Hauser of Womb Medicine. So yeah, I'm still doing that through the winter. The herbal shop is still there, although it's in really low stock after I sold at a holiday market in person. So I'll be spending the next couple months restocking. But there is some things left there. So yeah, just giving you all those updates so that you can stay in touch as the podcast goes dark. And we have a really wonderful episode to finish out the season with. So today on the podcast, we have my friend Kasia, and Kasia is a women's holistic fertility specialist whose life has not led a very typical trajectory. Kasia shares her story about going from birth control-induced thrush to anti-fungal medication that required she get her liver tested on a monthly basis, to finally reclaiming her power by tracking her cycle and getting easily pregnant because she knew her body so well. Kasia goes on to have a transformative experience in birthing her son and losing her father in the same day, that shatters her ego and ushers her into a new era where she is hearing the whispers of the sorceress and perimenopause. So, women, I hope you love this episode and wishing you a wonderful winter solstice and winter season. All right. Hey, Kat, welcome to the podcast.
Hello. So good to see your beautiful face.
I know. Oh my gosh. I know. Just so everyone knows, before Kat and I were recording, we were just bonding over seeing each other face to face, at least on the Zoom screen again, because Kat is in Australia and I'm in North Carolina, USA. But we were in the blood mystery school together, and in the blood mystery school, we go so deep into our lives and our journeys through our wombs. And so Kat and I have quite a deep relationship, even though we're on opposite sides of the world and have never met in person.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and like I was saying, sometimes, we went so deep with Blood Mysteries and we got to see inside each other's lives on such a personal level that I felt like I got to know quite a few of you girls so much better than some of even my closest friends. So, yeah, I feel like I'm just, yeah, reconnecting to to an old friend. It's so beautiful. Thank you for having
Oh,
me on.
yeah, thank you for being here. I know because we go into topics that are quite yeah, like personal and deep. And
Yeah.
I think just, the cycle in general is that way. And so yeah, I'd love for you to share first what phase of your cycle you're in right now. And then after that, you can share what phase of life you're into.
Yeah, so I'm definitely in my Leo phase. I'm on day 20 of my cycle. So I'm really, yeah, embracing that autumn, and the sorceress is definitely coming out. The rose colored glasses have been ripped off and stomped on. And I'm like, oh my God, the house is a mess. Why are those dishes still there? Why hasn't this been done? And yeah, my husband and son are a bit like, oh, on their on their back heel a bit. So I've got to rein her in and balance her out a bit this cycle. It's been a bit of an intense one.
Oh gosh, yeah. I mean, it's such an interesting phase. Like I was just talking about this actually on Instagram. I was just posting about the sorceress energy, the luteal phase, that it's like it's such a dynamic phase because it's the longest, right? Like our luteal is like the longest phase of our cycle.
Yeah.
Um, and there's like sort of, I like to think about it like in autumn, in the season of autumn, it's like there's something to harvest.
Mm.
But there's also like a death too. And so there's this two kind of polarizing, but not really energies of like gratitude and abundance, but then also like all the things you've done. But then there's also this like, and now I'm done and everything needs to be done and it needs to
Yeah.
be over. And
Yeah, that winter is coming and you need to start, prepping. Yeah,
totally.
yeah. It's fun, but if you embrace that energy, you can get so much done.
Hmm.
And really feel good. It's like a cleanup for the next cycle. So you can just ease
Hmm.
into it, relax, look back at what you've achieved. So I really feel like, yeah, it's like someone yeah, chasing you with a stick or something, like going, come on, hurry, hurry, hurry. Yeah, so it's just trying to find the beauty in the
Yeah.
luteal phase, in the sorceress energy. Yeah.
Yeah, and there is a lot. I think, and if women are creating spaciousness, if you're creating spaciousness in your life, like you might notice that that just kind of naturally happens. I know that's how it is for me. Like I do track my cycle, of course, but I'm not always like, okay, and today I shift into luteal. But I'll be
Mm,
like, oh wow, I'm cooking a lot. I'm cleaning up my
mm,
house a lot. I'm like making a lot of soup right now. Like
mhm.
I'm also in my
Yeah.
luteal phase. And we'll probably begin bleeding either tomorrow or the next day. And like the past couple of days, I'm just like making soup and dancing in the kitchen and like deep cleaning the stove. And it's like just naturally happening that way.
Yeah, 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 yeah. I opened my fridge up today. I'm like, "Ooh, I need to pull everything out of here." Things like you would never think of doing. Um, yeah,
Yes.
and it is a funny I find that too. It's that real energetic shift. So when last week I was in my ovulatory phase. So I was fun and flirty and just wanted to cozy up to my husband and, all the things, and just, could stare into his eyes. Like, and then all of a sudden, because he's still in that energy. He's like, "Yeah, I've got this vivacious, wifey here." And then all of a sudden, I'm like, just give me a sec, I just need some time,
Yes,
Don't touch me so fast,
absolutely.
like let me just, yeah. So I
This
do
is
it with the
so
men too. 'Cause even though
Yeah.
my husband's really, like, he has an understanding, it's still super confusing for the men to have this different personality,
Oh,
suddenly come
yeah.
out. Mm.
So, yeah, to, like, start to learn about that, I'm just getting on my phone because I wanted to share this, like this is so funny because one of my friends who also went to the blood mystery school just sent me this Instagram reel from someone named Anna Marie Schartzer, and it says you're gonna laugh. It says, "A study has revealed that a woman's preferences for male facial features can change with her cycle. For instance, when she is ovulating, she tends to be attracted to men with rugged and masculine features. However, during luteal phase and menstruation, she might prefer a man with duct tape over his mouth, a spear lodged in his chest, and engulfed in flames."
Oh, the poor man, but it's true.
I know. But I think
No. No.
it made me laugh so much because, it's fun to be silly about it and, like, poke fun at, like, our different
Yeah, that's
archetypes, you
it.
know?
It's that
But it's
extreme,
really
isn't it? Because,
it
yeah,
is,
there
yeah.
are those moments. There are those
Yeah.
moments, but yeah, it's being able to relate to that and to just rein it in and go, "Oh, I understand why I'm here, and
Yes,
I'm
so bring
embracing it."
consciousness to it.
Yeah, and also leaning into, like, we might not want to be intimate with our husbands, but kind of like I feel the same with going out in the luteal phase,
Mhm.
if I've been invited to something, I'm a lot more hesitant in my luteal phase, but once
Yeah,
I'm out and once I'm socializing, I'm so happy that I did.
yeah.
And I guess it's the same with, like, relating to your partners,
Mhm.
they still have their needs, and they want to connect, and they want to be intimate, and in this phase a lot of the time you're like, oh, I really can't, like, I'd rather deep clean the fridge or the pantry than be intimate with you right now. But then when you lean into it, a lot of the time it is a beautiful experience, and you're so happy that you surrender to that in that moment and just really took that
Mhm.
feminine, because I think you can get really masculine in your luteal phase like that,
Mhm.
and get that masculine energy.
I
So
uh,
yeah. Yeah.
yeah, and I think too, it's like the way that we relate to partners and even friends, it's just different. And so if like I think that I could hang out with just about anyone in my ovulatory phase and have a great time.
Yeah.
But in my luteal phase, like it's got to be those like safe people who I feel energetically good around, like who don't drain my energy. And
Yes,
so it's like if you've
definitely.
got a close friend or a partner who is that for you, hopefully, then
Mm.
you can lean into that and like like you said, like just talk to them about like how this phase of your cycle is different and what your needs are in this phase and how you like to connect in this phase, maybe um it's it's yeah, like maybe you're going to deep clean the fridge together, and that's how you connect.
Such a turn on. Do the dishes,
Right.
baby. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Vacuum that floor. Oh. Oh, no. But yeah, it's, definitely, definitely. And I think communicating with our partners about how we're feeling and where we're at, because they forget and they don't know, unless they're keeping track. And that sometimes that can be a bit weird. Your husband knows exactly what, or your partner knows exactly, what day of the cycle you're on. They're not, it's not their thing. But yeah, it is. Keep the communication lines open, definitely.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, well, and tell me about the phase of life you're in.
So I'm in my mothering phase. So
Mhm.
yeah, I have a beautiful 8-year-old boy. He's just such a cool dude. Love hanging out with him. Yeah, his name's Lucas, and he is like, it was a really dark sort of time in my life, and he was really that bringer of light. So one of the reasons why we called him Lucas. But yeah, really, but I am feeling that sorceress perimenopause sort of phase, tapping, just
Mhm.
slightly tapping on the window.
Wow.
And I'm not quite ready. Like, it's just, just a faint tap going,
Yeah.
hello, looking at me. Yeah. And so my husband and I are still, because we wanted to have more than one child, but
Mhm.
because it was a whole thing, and we could probably go into it a bit later
Yeah.
in the podcast. Yeah, it's just deferred that plan for a while. And suddenly, I'm 42, almost 41, 42 next year.
Mhm.
And yeah, and it's like, do we do it again? Have I gone through that now? Do I want to start
Mhm.
all the way at the beginning again and go
Mhm.
through those years of just like hardcore
Othering, yeah.
one-on-one, your life depends on me sort of phase where you have to
Yeah.
put a lot of your life aside, or yeah, so I'm kind of like one foot in, one foot out with
Yeah.
whether we try and have another baby. And with
Mm.
the medical system as it is, I'd be a geriatric
Oh
mom if
God.
I if I went through
As
another
if.
pregnancy. Yeah, I know. So yeah.
You'd
So
be
anyway,
geriatric even if you were 35 in their
I know.
system.
I know. It's insane. It is insane. Yeah. Some of the most vivacious, healthiest women I know are, having babies in their mid 40s. One of my good friends actually had her first baby at 48. So
Wow, that's
there's,
amazing.
there's a full spectrum.
Yeah.
But yeah, yeah. So I'm definitely still in my mothering phase, but I am feeling like just little previews of like, hello.
That's
This is
so
what's waiting for you.
interesting. Yeah, because it's like I know a lot of women in their like late 30s, early 40s, like they're not quite at that portal into perimenopause, menopause, the sorceress yet. But I feel like she almost comes tapping quite early to be like, hey, just so you know, like
Yeah,
I'm gonna rock your
definitely.
world. So get
Yeah.
ready.
Yeah. You're suddenly realizing like your body's starting to feel a little bit different. Um, I know I feel like I'm just starting to slow. I really need to conserve my energy.
Mm.
Whereas, 5, 10 years ago, I was really like out into the world.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so it has been a big change. And I've noticed my luteal phase as well is just a small thing, but just, a day shorter than what it
Mm.
used to be.
Yeah.
In on average. So yeah, yeah. I don't know. I know I've still got time, and my mum didn't go through menopause until her early 50s. So if that's an indication, I've still got some time.
Yeah.
But then with the modern world and what we're exposed to every day, and well, everything's happening a little bit earlier. Who knows? Who knows what might happen? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think it's good to just to know what's coming next. I think
Mm,
that's the beauty of knowing what the rites of passage are, is like they don't catch you unprepared, because for so many women they enter into that portal without really even realizing they're entering into a portal.
mm,
And it just becomes like, oh, what's wrong with me? Like,
yeah.
that's the question a lot of women in that phase ask themselves, like, oh, what's wrong with me? And it's like, well, you are changing. Your needs are
Yeah.
changing. Energy is changing.
Yeah.
Way of viewing the world is changing. Like the sorceress is very, when we think that's the luteal phase in our cycle, so that's the luteal phase of our life, is our perimenopausal, menopausal years. And then so it's
Mhm.
like all those things of like wanting to crawl out of your skin and needing to like clean up. It's like that affects you on a life level in that time of womanhood.
Oh, for sure. For
Yeah.
sure. Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know. I haven't actually been through it, but that's what I've heard.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And yeah, and just knowing, like you said, I think many women are so unprepared, or they have this, I guess, unbalanced relationship with their cycle as it is, that they're like, I can't wait for menopause,
Oh
can't wait
yeah.
to get rid of this, burden,
Yeah.
without taking the time to understand it and embrace it and realize how much of a superpower this is if we can just tune into it and learn to communicate with our bodies again.
Yeah.
It's such a blessing, and yeah, I think it'll be a bittersweet moment, that moment you realize that you're not getting your cycle back again.
Yeah.
Liberating in some ways, but it's also another, I guess, like almost like another ego death. Just like,
Yeah.
yeah, all the initiations we go through, it's like a part of you dies, but a part of you, new part of you comes to life. Yeah, it's
Mm.
huge. It's huge. And that bonding with community and your village has just disappeared. So women are doing it on their own, in secret, in quiet, and talking to
Yeah.
doctors who don't really understand.
Right.
Yeah, so it would be like yeah, you would think you were losing your mind, I think, when you're going through
Hmm.
that without having that connection. You would think you're going insane.
Well, absolutely. And it's the same way that women think that they're going insane right before their period. I
Yeah.
have a like membership called the Cyclical Living Circle, and we were just having a conversation in there about I was asking the women in there, like, when do you start to feel that descent into like what I call like the darkness or the underworld in your cycle? when you want to like crawl out of your skin and become someone new and it feels like everything around you is collapsing. And all the women are like 3 days before, 4 days before, 5 days before, 3 days before, right? And so it's like that
Mm.
same energy, but imagine that's like years of your life,
Mm.
it's got to throw you for a loop if you don't know what's going on. Like that's why so many women in that phase
Yeah,
are on antidepressants. Like
yeah,
they
yeah.
think
They
something's
think
wrong
they're
with them.
bipolar. They're some of them are
Yeah.
getting diagnosed as bipolar at
Yeah,
that age. There's a
absolutely.
huge increase in that, and yeah, it's tragic. It's tragic that women don't have that education, that support, um, from the medical community, but from society at large. I think menopause is like there's like a big ramp up now, though. If you haven't noticed on, oh, I don't know if you might not be targeted. I'm getting targeted. Perimenopause and menopause just seems to be everywhere on my Instagram feed, on my Facebook feed, like just talking about perimenopause and menopause.
Yeah.
Um, and that's great. Like the information's always been out there, and I look to people like Dr. Christiane Northrup, who
Yes. Yeah.
I just
So good.
adore her.
Yeah.
It's been spoken about for so long, but it's only just getting like the social media, I guess, recognition now, and it's getting ramped up. I think a lot of our generation that grew up with social media are now coming into that phase, perhaps, and yeah. So
Yeah.
I guess that's a positive as long as they're getting the right advice out there and not
Yeah.
just being sold something.
Yeah,
Yeah.
totally. Well, I think it depends on, yeah, I haven't gotten too much of it targeted to me, but I do see the posts from Red School, the two women who wrote Wild Power,
Yes.
that
Yeah.
book. And they also
Yeah.
wrote a book called Wise Power, which is about
Thank you.
perimenopause and menopause. And I've seen on their Instagram account, it's at red.school. They've been posting a lot about menopause and they call it, I think they call perimenopause the quickening or something. Anyways, they've got a
Ooh.
lot of really cool information that they've been sharing. So highly
Yeah.
recommend that.
Okay. I know I read their book years and years and years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna check that out actually. That sounds
Yeah, it's
good.
cool. And I've recommended the Wise Power book to a couple women who I know who are in their menopause time right now, have either like not bled in a few months or, it's irregular. And so I think it's a great resource for
Yeah.
anyone too who's like in that now. And yeah, maybe you'll go through this perimenopause, menopause time in the next 10 years of your life
Mm.
and you'll offer something to the women. I think we need more women who have been through this experience to help other women move through it too.
Yeah. And all different experiences too. Yeah, because every
Uh,
woman's experience is unique.
yeah.
Um, yeah, the more voices out there, the better.
Yeah.
Mm, I love that. I'm gonna write that down actually. Wise power.
Yeah, wise
Thank
power.
you.
Yeah. Yeah, well, speaking of like, these rites of passage that we go through, kind of on a different note, I'd love to talk to you about your first one. So, what do you want to share about your men arc?
Yeah, so for me, my menarche, um, I was about 12 and I remember going to the toilet at school and I saw blood in the toilet and I thought I was actually peeing blood. So
Oh
I was like,
no.
"Oh, what's wrong with me?" So I ran to the teacher and I told her and she just dismissed it.
Mm.
And then I think I didn't really maybe there was a couple of days where
But
nothing
she didn't say
happened.
anything like that's your period or
No.
what? That's
No, there was
so weird.
nothing. Really dismissed me. So I don't know why. I don't know, maybe she
Oh
was having an off day.
God,
I don't
that's so
know.
weird.
I just remember like her going, "Don't be silly, whatever, keep going." But I grew up in a real sort of country town, city, I guess, and every
Okay.
you know, yeah, so everything was maybe a little bit backwards back then. But yeah, so then a few days later, I think I experienced the same thing at home and I told my mum
Mhm.
and her reaction was just like F, like
Uh,
oh, how is this happening now? Really? Are you serious? Like this is just like a disaster, like
mm,
you're like I can't believe this is happening to you right now. Um yeah. So it was this sort of I was like I was really confused and I was really
yeah.
like, "Oh, what have I done wrong? Have I done, like
Oh.
innately like is there something wrong with me? Have I done something
Oh.
wrong?" So then she gave me, these really big thick pads, no wings, so you're
Oh,
always leaking.
oh,
And to save money, she's like, right, so what you need to do is get like all these tissues and fold them up as an extra barrier so you can have this pad like all day and just keep
no.
reusing the tissues. So I felt like I was like, I had this massive nappy on. I felt like everyone could see. Um, and I was really as a child, I was really curious about my body. I
Mm,
really wanted to know how it worked, and I was really, yeah, just I would have loved all that information. It wouldn't have been something I don't think too scary for me. I think I would have been the sort of child to devour it. So yeah, so I really wish I had have had, I guess, a little bit of a intro to
yeah.
that before it actually happened. And just I wish my mum had have embraced it and celebrated a bit more instead of already
Mhm.
initiating that curse that
Yeah.
was in reverse now, right? But yeah, that sense of it being a curse. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, gosh, that's so tough because I think about just those first impressions of what you receive, whatever is like sort of reflected back to you really informs your experience.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
yeah, and I had
Mm,
someone on a couple weeks ago, Janelle, from South Africa, who was sharing about the first thing her mom did was smile. Like that was the first thing she received is like her mom
mm,
smiled. And it's like,
yeah.
wow. And so then for the first thing you receive to be like, oh no. And
Mm,
for you, like specifically for you to feel like like when you were speaking of what your mom said, I was like, man, she's acting like you did something wrong. I hope you didn't internalize that. But of course, as little girls, we do. It's like
yeah.
even if we
Yeah.
don't try to, it's just like our mom is our world. And so and
Yeah.
she's who we look to for like what's right in the world. And
Yeah.
so it's like if she's like, this is wrong, oh my God, imagine thinking the process that your body is doing naturally every month is wrong. That's
Yeah. Yeah. And a burden
yeah.
and yeah, and really stressful because having to have this tissue pad system,
Oh my God,
whatever it
yeah,
was.
that's so intense.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But like my mum's awesome. So, but yeah, she was brought up in kind like Eastern Europe, like during communism.
Mm.
So I
Oh
think
God.
it was very much like I guess with her experience would have been very much that cold sort of experience perhaps too.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, well,
But
I think all
women
we
didn't
can
get
do,
into a lot later back then.
yeah. I think all we can do
Mm.
is just keep doing better. Like,
Yeah.
we just all keep doing better. But yeah, so what do you do with that? Like, what do you do with that imprint when you're a little girl? Like, how do those early years of bleeding go for you?
Yeah, I think it was just a bit of a drag, I suppose, like embarrassing. Yeah, I didn't want to participate in any sports
Mhm.
or yeah, so it was a bit of a yeah, it was very painful as well at times. So it was so painful that I'd have to stay in bed for a day or I'd take Panadol at the time because I thought that was a thing to do. Um yeah, I do remember though, like for a plus for my mum, I remember we had this magazine in Australia called Dolly, which is just anyway, it was a crazy thing. Like if you think about these stereotypical girls, the models and how you like,
Okay.
well, like aimed at 14-year-old girls, but it was all about
Oh
how to get
God.
fit, how to get trim, what's your diet, it was like very much leading you on to, future Mary Claire and all that sort of stuff.
Hmm.
Um, but they did have a thing in there with a brand. I don't know if you have the brand Libra pads over there. We've got this brand called Libra, and yeah, and there was a little form that you sent away, and it came. Mum helped me fill it out and send it away, and it came with a kit, so kind of describing what was happening to you and giving you,
Mm.
like positions to help with the cramps. But I do remember my
Aw.
cramps were just so intense, so
Mm.
intense and like having to go to school and sit there in your chair and just like going back like just rocking backwards and forwards and trying to get through the day, just stuffing yourself with Panadol and
Oh
whatever
God.
painkiller you had at the time. um and whether that was influenced by that initial shock and trauma,
Mhm.
and that carry
Yeah.
on effect, because you'll have this negative experience and obviously your body's then going into a bit of fight or flight every time you're getting it, because it's like, this is wrong, what's happening,
Yeah. Yeah.
almost like a fear type thing coming up. Whether that had an influence or not, I'm not sure. But yeah,
Yeah.
when I got to about 16, 17, one of my girlfriends approached me and she was like, oh my gosh, I just started the pill. And I was a very late bloomer. So I didn't really have, serious boyfriends or anything until my late teens. But she was selling it to me like, you can skip your period. And so if we have a swimming carnival or there's something on you don't want to miss out on, you just keep going and you don't have to get your period. And I was like, wow, this is great. And my doctor at the time
Yeah.
said it was a really healthy thing to do,
Oh
that
my God.
women shouldn't have, so many cycles in their
Okay,
lifetime.
yeah.
And
What? I've only started recently hearing this, that that's a thing doctors told people, like, oh, we're bleeding way
mm,
more than we need to be. And it's like, what?
yeah.
That's an
Yeah. They were
insane
telling me
idea.
if you don't go on the pill, you might experience more rates of breast cancer later on because of the hormones and the excess
So
estrogen. I don't
insane.
know. It was who came up with this, right? But yeah, my doctor was like, back in the day, you would have been having babies at, let's say, 16 to 19. So you probably wouldn't have had your first period until you're about 16. Then you go straight on to having babies, and then you probably have 3, 4, 5 babies, right? And so in between that, because you're pregnant, you're breastfeeding, you might have a couple of periods in between and then get pregnant again. So really, you should only have, I don't know, whatever number it was, 30 periods or something in your
Oh
whole
my
life.
God. That I mean, it's just absolutely insane. And also to say like, oh, the increased rate of exposure to estrogen could cause whatever. And then it's like, okay, so let's give you fake estrogen.
Yeah.
Like, let's give you fake hormones so that the real ones don't mess you up. Like, that's insane.
Insane, insane. And yeah, so I remember I launched into that. I thought I trusted my doctor at the time. I
Yeah.
It was secret from my mum though, because my mum had a lot of fears about me, and I think if she thought I was on the pill, she thought I was probably already having intercourse, and that was her worst fear, is me, becoming some sort of hussy or whatever out there in the world. So anyway, so I was taking this pill in secret, and then after probably about 5 or 6 years, I was working in the corporate world by then. I'd finished my uni studies, and I was working in this corporate world, and I developed, and this is like probably a bit of TMI, but I developed like hella bad thrush, like to
Mhm.
the extreme. And I was like, what the hell? I couldn't even sit at my desk. I was like, oh my God, this is so
Oh,
irritating. So I went to my doctor. And I actually said to her, do you think this could have something to do with me taking this contraceptive? And she was like, no, there's no chance at all. Like, there's no correlation between taking all this artificial, artificial, hormones, making your body think it's basically like in some menopausal state for all these years, right? And there being any effect on your vaginal,
well, it's like, of
ecosystem.
course, there's an effect. Like, we know that birth control affects the microbiome, like it affects the
True.
flora. And like, of course,
Yeah.
it's going to disrupt your vaginal microbiome.
Yeah, exactly. And she put me on this crazy anti-fungal, I guess, medication. I can't remember what it was called now. But
Mm.
with this, I had to go. How insane is this? I had to go once a month to the blood labs and get my blood tested to make sure my liver wasn't failing while I was on this drug.
No.
And so it was after, I think it was because when you're young, you're just so naive, and we didn't really
Yeah.
have access to information back then like we do now. I didn't have the internet. I didn't much. We didn't have that plethora, that we could just go out and find information at our fingertips. So anyway, so I was there the second time I was getting my bloods drawn to see if my liver was still functioning. I had this moment of just like, it was like something snapped inside of me. I just this moment of realization, like, this is nuts. What am I doing? So that's when suddenly
Good.
I stood up in my own power, and then I started doing my research, and
Mm.
and yeah, and that's when I found I was working also with so a Catholic social services
Mm.
organization at the time that did natural family planning. That was called
Okay,
natural
yeah.
fertility education, whatever it's called now. So I had access to these women who are just, oh my gosh, like, just, they had so much knowledge about women's fertility. But I decided at that point that I'm going off the pill. I'm going to see what happens. I don't care what my doctor says. I finally stood in my own power, got off the pill, 2 weeks later, my symptoms disappeared without the need
Wow.
for anti-fungal.
Right, well, it's
Like,
like that's the thing with the medical system is, like, something goes wrong with one of their pharmaceuticals, they give you another, and then
yeah,
even that other one is, like, gonna mess up your liver, and it's like, why don't we just stop the problem
yeah,
in the first place? Like, it's just
yeah,
it gets so I think what the problem with the I mean, there's so many problems with the Western medical system, but the one that really sticks out to me right now, it's like, they're so in the weeds with everything, like, "Oh, and this very specific thing, and this," as if the body isn't this whole system that needs to be supported as a whole system.
yeah, yeah, and I'm
Wow.
sure if I carried on, there would have
Oh,
been a
yeah.
tablet for my liver, right?
Right? Like,
And
you
then
would
that
have
would have
needed
had a
some
side
liver
effect that I would have had.
medication. So, how
Yeah.
old were you when you're like, "Okay, I'm done. I'm getting off birth control."
So I think I was about 22 at the time.
Nice.
So I think all up, I was on the pill for about 7 years.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. About
Well,
22
good
or
for you for
23.
having that moment of being like, "This is
Yeah.
nuts."
This is nuts. Yeah, and then having access to these women who are teaching natural fertility education, so I was basically
Yeah.
them, um, because I
Yeah.
was really scared then, because I did have partners and, I didn't want to fall pregnant at
Yeah.
that point,
Yeah.
um and then being able to access them and then suddenly, like my head just exploded. I'm like, we have all this wisdom inside us. Like our body tells us everything we need to know. And this has been scientifically studied. There's been all these papers, like peer reviewed studies from all over the world.
Yeah.
Um, and the medical establishment just doesn't want to recognize it because they don't trust the woman
Mhm.
to be self responsible for her own body. So,
Which is
like, you're
so
gonna make a
crazy.
mistake. Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah. You're gonna stuff up, take a pill. You don't have that in you. Yeah, it's heartbreaking. But that's what opened me up, I guess, to, then embracing my cycle. I got really excited about
Wow.
getting my period and being able to
Aw.
review my cycle. So it started changing that relationship with my body and going, "Wow, look at this. I've got a healthy luteal phase. Oh, this is when
Oh,
I've ovulated, and I'm getting all this amazing, like cervical mucus that I thought was really
yeah.
weird when I first got it, but now I'm like celebrating it and yeah, and just having that period as that report card for the rest of your cycle as well, just really started to yeah, change me emotionally and eventually physically as well.
Mm,
Yeah.
mm. I love that. I just love that. And I love that you found it, you were pretty young, like, that's
Mm.
amazing.
Yeah, yeah. But I truly think that the experience I had with the pill, even in that 7 years, and perhaps getting put on those weird meds as well, um, I guess I'm still feeling the effects of that. It took quite a few years for my cycle to regulate again. And I never really went through hardcore puberty, but maybe because I didn't give my body the chance to fully
Mm,
develop before I went on the pill. But I went through this crazy time when my hair suddenly became really greasy, and this was in my mid 20s. So,
oh, wow.
stuff that was supposed to happen in my teen years, I got acne for the first time. My boobs went like from being on the pill. I was called Booby McTits was like my nickname at school because I just had these obviously from the estrogen or whatever, right? Just like these big
Yeah.
boobs. And then they disappeared into nothing. I just had like little like
Wow.
I don't know what they were. And then it's like they redeveloped again. I just went through it's like I went through a second puberty after I came off the pill. And
Wow.
that shocked me too. And I'm so glad women have access to, books like Beyond the Pill and all that stuff now, where they can help that transition because I just stopped cold turkey and had nothing to support me and support my body in
Mm.
detoxifying all those hormones. And yeah, so it's a journey in itself, but it took a few years for my cycle to finally regulate. And yeah.
Wow, yeah, I mean, I think getting off the pill, it's like a whole thing, like, I have a lot of women who I work with in, like, one-on-one sessions who literally are just coming to me for that, to help
Mm-hmm.
them transition off the pill, and it's really hard, like, a lot of
Mm,
them, like, are very tempted to go back on because of, like, how their acne returns in such a vicious way or how
yeah.
whatever, and it's like sometimes the body's like, it's gotta get that all out
Yeah.
before and, And it's also like, of course it's going to come back because you never actually healed it. You just shoved it down for a long time. And that's going to make it angry.
Exactly. Exactly. And your body it needs to detox, it needs to experience all that. And and what I've learned with all the education that I've been getting is like even the cervix, doesn't fully develop until your early 20s. So when you go
Mm.
on the pill in your teens, it's like freezing the development of your cervix. So
Whoa.
it becomes it's not as it's more perceptible, more um open to getting different infections because it hasn't thickened the way it should have. Basically, it's the
Wow.
membranes are still so thin. So that's another layer, and you don't get told that by your doctor. Maybe just wait.
No.
You know,
And
yeah,
that's
wait
like,
till you're fully
that's,
developed. It's like castration, really. It's like you're going,
oh, totally. Well, and
hmm,
it's just reminding me too of like how many women get, like abnormal pap smears because
mhm,
of stuff with their cervix and when they're
yeah,
like in their high school and college years. Like a lot of girls in college would have like, abnormal paps. And it's like,
yeah,
oh, well, you've got to blah, 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 do this and that and that. And it's like, oh, well, maybe their cervix just wasn't fully developed
yeah.
because, wow, that's such an interesting connection.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Because if it's so much more permeable, like the protective barriers haven't fully developed yet, even if they're not being sexually active, they're still getting exposed to environmental toxins, like going swimming in a
Yeah.
pool or whatever, like whatever you're doing, things that, like it's still stuff, or wearing synthetic undies or whatever it is, right?
Hmm.
Yeah, or non-organic pads, whatever. Um, yeah, it's
Right.
that protective barrier hasn't fully formed. So I definitely I'm a big proponent at educating young women about that
That's
as part of
really
their informed
important.
consent for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. Ooh, okay. So you you get your cycle to regulate, you're getting excited about learning about it. Um, so what kind of comes next?
Yeah. So I just dove headfirst into there's the fertility world and tracking and all the different methods.
Mhm.
I loved it so much and just embraced it. It became part of my life.
Yeah.
And I was teaching friends, and there was lots of women similar to me who just didn't want to be on a contraceptive, but they weren't ready, perhaps, to start a family yet, or wanted to have that confidence within
Yeah.
them that they knew what was going on. Um, so that started my like I it was yeah, been so funny because I was in the corporate world for so long and then started my own like marketing consultancy, and I've had my own businesses. But none of that was really passionate for me. So
Mm,
it wasn't until I just had the realization that what do I actually love doing? And it was like I love teaching women this. So that's what
mm,
kept me going on the journey with the education, and yeah.
wow.
Yeah, and just getting to this phase now, like obviously like I became a mum when I was
Yeah.
33. Yeah, so that just and we got pregnant within 2 cycles just because I knew when when the timing was right. And
Oh, that's amazing.
so it really took us no time at all to get pregnant. Um and I really put that down to the education I had and
Yeah.
knowing
Well,
my body so well.
and that you'd like done the work to heal your cycle, and heal your hormones and be like healthy on a full body level before you actually wanted to get pregnant. I think that's a really key piece because a lot
Oh,
of women,
totally.
it's not their fault, but they don't even think about their fertility until they like want to get pregnant and then are really
Mm,
devastated to find out that it takes time to heal your
yeah,
fertility because your fertility is just your health, right? Like to be in
yeah,
a female body, to be able to get pregnant easily is to be healthy.
that's
Um,
right. Yeah, yeah.
so it's like, yeah.
And every woman is different too, right? So some women can have, sex 5, 6 days before they ovulate, and they're so like it's just the way that, their cervical mucus is developed and all that sort of stuff that they can then hold on to that until ovulation. Whereas some women have to have, have to be intimate right on, like within
Yeah.
hours at some point. And I'm pretty sure I fall into the category that I fell pregnant like the day of ovulation. And then the cycle
Yeah.
before, yeah, we were intimate probably like a day or so out. So for me,
Mm.
maybe that window's a lot shorter. For other women, it can be a lot longer. So we're all just so unique. Yeah. And
Yeah, and
yeah.
because you kind of knew your body and your patterns, you could figure that out.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
So how was your pregnancy?
So when yeah, so I was a real A, what's it? Is it like a A personality? A plus
Type
A
A?
type personality? Type
Yeah.
A, that's the one. Type A
Yeah.
personality. So I was very much a go-getter. Like before I got pregnant, I was fearless. So that's why I had all these businesses, and I was gonna launch my fertility business then, which
Yeah.
look completely different to what I'm going to be launching now. But man, I was just on it, and I had it all. I had the spreadsheets. I had I've written down how my birth was going to go.
Mm.
And then how many weeks it'll take me to get back on board, with everything. Like in 6 weeks, I'll be doing this.
Oh my
Um,
gosh.
I had it all planned out because you have to plan 12 months ahead, and this was me.
Wow.
Like I was just in this hyper masculine energy, I suppose.
Yeah.
Um, which is not a negative thing. I think it's great, like to get stuff
Well, yeah,
done. But
like goal
man,
setting is great, but also it's
yeah.
like birth and pregnancy. I think we can plan to a certain extent, but it's also like you don't know till you.
Uh, yeah. And it was, let me tell you, an ego death for me. My whole pregnancy journey. So,
I mean,
so my
yeah, it's the
plan
maiden to
was,
mother thing. It's like it's huge.
oh, exactly. But I was so body positive. I was
Mm,
so body positive and so believing in myself that I just thought I'd have no dramas.
mm.
Um, but yeah, so I remember I was on the cusp of launching my business when I fell pregnant. And I was like, that's great. I've got 9 months. I'll get this all out. I'll automate it. And then by the time I have the baby, it'll be running itself. I'll outsource stuff and then I'll get back on, when I'm ready. Um, but at 12 to 8, not 10, 12 weeks, I got the worst nausea. So I
Mm.
just felt like I had motion sickness for
Uh,
about half my pregnancy, I would say,
wow.
to the point where, I was laying on the couch. Netflix wasn't even around then, so I just had to watch whatever was running on the 4 channels that we had at the time. And I was there with a bucket, some water. Um, I couldn't keep anything down except weird things like deep fried chips or
Oh my god,
fries
so
or like
funny.
I know the stuff that I didn't want to eat. Anything else like just and the thing is I wouldn't vomit much. So maybe I should have to get it out, whatever it was out. But I just felt like I was on the verge all the time, and it just wiped me, just totally wiped me. Yeah, and also on my journey as well, I found out my father was really sick. So from
Oh,
about and sorry if I tear up. Sometimes I do.
no,
Some people
okay.
don't. We'll see how I go. But yeah. So he got really, really sick. Um, and so from about halfway, so once I started feeling a little bit better, my dad went into hospital, and
Mm.
he had, yeah, he was trying to hang on for me, but yeah. So half my pregnancy, I was on my couch trying not to vomit. The other half, I was in hospital pretty much with my dad. Yeah, and still, it was just really hard.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's bringing back a lot.
Mm.
Yeah, but anyway, yeah. So I remember speaking to him when I was really fully pregnant, and I knew I couldn't be with him. And I just said to him, you know, please hang on, don't. I really want you to meet your grandson. I was his only child. He
Yeah.
was looking forward so much to having grandchildren, and I felt so much responsibility towards him.
Mm.
Being the only child as well. I felt like I needed to be there for him during his passing.
Mm.
Um, but yeah, so in the end, I was watching him deteriorate, had this new life growing within me. I was trying to stay positive, and I was like, I was really hardcore into the positive birth movement at that point as well, which I think obviously has its benefits, but I think too being just surrounded by all the good stories and not exposing myself to anything that could go wrong um, meant that if something did go wrong, the crash is a lot harder.
Mm.
Um, so I wasn't prepared for anything going wrong because I believed in my body so much, and I
Mm.
felt like I could do it. So we'd booked in a private midwife to do a home birth. And I thought that's the way, that was my ideal scenario. I really wanted to give birth naturally, no drugs, no anything, at home in the place I was really comfortable. I really, despised hospitals at that stage because I spent so much time in the hospital with my dad and
Oh
just seeing
gosh,
how the
yeah.
system works, right? I was like, I do not want to give birth there.
Yeah.
In the end, Lucas was breech. So
Mm.
his head was up, bum was down, feet were somewhere in the middle. So he was in actually a pretty good position to potentially give birth naturally, breech
Yeah.
naturally,
Yeah.
um, bum first instead of being a
Yeah.
footling.
Right.
Yeah, and I tried everything. I worked with chiropractors, acupuncturists, Chinese, medicine, everything. I was like, working with spinning babies as well. So I was upside down on this like ironing board up against the wall for like half an hour a day. I was moxibustioning my little toes. I was,
All the crazy
like
things we do.
massaging. Yeah. And I ended up finding a really amazing obstetrician in our town who really wanted me to give birth naturally. Because my private midwife at that stage was like, look, I've got no experience of breech babies. I don't
Mm.
feel confident. And she actually sort of, I guess, I don't know whether she lied or just maybe didn't know, but she said that there's no private midwife that will willingly deliver a breech baby
Huh.
because of insurance. I later found out there were some who were willing to do that, but I
Yeah,
followed her advice, which
yeah.
led me to this obstetrician, who was amazing anyway. And I went to like this small little private hospital to give birth because it had a bit more of a homely
Mm.
environment. But yeah, I still wanted to do it naturally. And this obstetrician, it was actually her weekend off when I went into labor, and she was reffing her son's cricket game at the time. So she'd come in all dressed in white with like green zinc on her
Oh my
nose.
god.
But she'd just be like standing there, like, just observing. And she's like, oh, I'd love to have like this on my books to have another, a natural breech birth. She was very
Mhm.
hands off. But in the
Mm.
end, I'd labored for, I don't know, I think it was about 24 hours. And I had to have a monitor on me because of the hospital policy the whole time, which probably
Mm.
interfered. But yeah, his heart rate started to slow quite, yeah, quite quickly. And so she was worried that things, instead of progressing, I think my cervix had started opening up and it actually started closing up again towards the
Mm.
end of that time. So yeah, I always question, if I had have had it at home without the monitoring, maybe I would have been more relaxed. Perhaps
Yeah,
not. You always have these questions in your mind. So in the
of
end,
course, yeah.
um, yeah, she told me, all right, it's time to have a cesarean. Like I think this is the only way to go,
Mm.
which was the most devastating news because that's the total opposite of what I had dreamed of and what I had really wanted. And also just made me feel like like in that moment, I'm just like, my body's failed me. I'm a failure,
Well, and it's
especially.
like yeah,
Mm,
I mean, it's like, of course, it's interesting too to think about, like relating to your menarche with like the imprint of like, oh, I'm doing something wrong.
mm,
Have
yeah,
that like show up again, right, in your birth story. But it's also like, I know that I'm hearing you say that like you liked this woman, this obstetrician, and whatever, but it's also like she sort of reflected to you like you need the cesarean, and who knows if that would have been your truth, if
yeah,
you'd been
yeah.
able to move freely and be in an environment that relaxed you. It's just, yeah, like so hard to know. We can't know what would have happened. I mean, yeah,
Yeah, it's so hard to know. And I played that what if game I still do. That what if game comes up all the time, right?
yeah, but
And
it's
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, it is hard, especially when you've been in this positive birth movement
Hmm.
where you don't want that. nothing can go wrong, you know? I don't wanna be one of the failure stories. But
Oh
I
my
was
god.
there so, I was such an advocate for this positive birth,
Yeah.
positive birth movement. Yeah, and I didn't do hypnobirthing, but I did something similar. So I was really, like, embracing all the contractions, but that moment she said, "It's time to have a cesarean, like, emergency C-section." It's like I just snapped out of it, and each contraction after that, I thought I was gonna die. I just thought
Of course, you were
the
stressed.
pain yeah, the pain
You were
was
scared,
so
like,
yeah. Yeah, 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 so intense. And so they wheeled me off, and I after a few attempts, because I was just like, "Ah," um, every time a contraction came in is when he was trying to put the epidural in, and I was like, "Oh my god," they were so close
I know,
together.
like, the
Um,
worst.
so yeah, so finally I had the epidural, and, my body reacted, so I was, like, shaking, have the shakes or whatever. Um but yeah, so I had a screen put up so I couldn't actually see what was happening. My husband was there though, and yeah, he said it was actually kind of like a bit scary, I guess, for him to see, like, her trying to get our baby out. And he was actually not coming out. So she had him by the feet and she started, like, quite gently trying to get him out. And then she was like yanking because I guess there's a time limit what she can get, what you can do.
Oh.
And she finally got him out. And later on, she told us he had this sort of position, my stomach, and his elbows were acting as an anchor on my rib cage. So
Oh,
she was saying that perhaps that could have been the cause of him not being able to come out. He'd actually anchored himself on my ribs, and even though my body was doing all the right thing,
yeah.
physically, he was just stuck inside me.
So
So
in
interesting. Yeah. So, so yeah, she had a bit of a playoff with the, pediatrician there because sometimes they're rivals, especially if they're trying to do things a little bit more naturally. Because I said I didn't
Mm,
want the umbilical cord cut too quickly.
mm.
And so she was kind of trying to delay the pediatrician, but because the baby hadn't cried or made a sound early enough, the pediatrician stepped in and, did his thing. Yeah,
Okay,
and I
but
got,
that's so crazy to me because if he wasn't doing well, wouldn't you want him to have his cord blood?
yeah, you think so, right?
That's so wild to me that that's the thought. Like, "Oh,
Yeah,
let's do an artificial something to help him versus, like,
yeah,
the body that
yeah,
nourishes him."
yeah. Let's put him on this cold table away from his mother and
Oh my god, so he
do
was
whatever
taken
they
away from
do.
you.
Slap
He was
them
taken a
around. I don't know.
so he was taken
Yeah,
away from you very quickly?
yeah, but in the same room.
Okay.
And then he made a sound quite quickly, and the pediatrician checked him over, and then he was on my chest. So it was probably only a couple of minutes, but it felt like eternity, right?
Oh, of course, you're like my
Yeah.
baby.
Yeah, yeah, and I'm in shock, and I'm there, like, shaking
Yeah.
on the table. Yeah, and in that time as well, what I hadn't been told was that my father was passing.
Mm.
So, yeah, my poor husband had to keep that from me, and, he had we had Skype at the time. That was the only way to video call. And he had my dad on the Skype call. And yeah, it was just my dad was saying, because he's Polish, and so he saw me and the baby, and I was in so much shock. I didn't have anything to say. And I didn't know that would be the last time I'd see him or be able to speak to him. And he just kept saying, "Coś podobnego," which means, like, wow, amazing, right? And his last promise to me, like, yeah, last time I saw him in hospital, I was like, "Dad, please just stay around to meet your baby, your baby grandson. Please just promise me that." And that's what he did. So he saw that I was okay, that the baby was okay, and he passed about an hour after that. Um, so that was just this. I think my whole world came crashing down because even though I had this beautiful baby, I was just so numb. I was, the whole pregnancy, I was like believing that my body could do this, that I was strong and powerful and nothing could go wrong. And I felt like I failed as a woman, that my body had failed me. that I'd gone this way, like gone from a home birth to a hospital birth to being cut open. And then my dad, not being there for my dad. I felt like I should have been there in his passing, because me and my dad were just so close. He was my rock. And yeah, it was just, yeah, it was a hard time, because I felt like I wasn't allowed to be happy. I felt I wasn't allowed to be sad. And I just didn't know what to feel. So I felt nothing for a long time. And even though I had this beautiful baby, and you're supposed to feel like this, you know, even though I didn't get the whole oxytocin thing, you're still made to feel as if, this should be like this amazing love bond. And I knew I had to take care of this little human, and I was so protective of him. I didn't let anyone touch him in the hospital, and any offers of any medical interventions, I'm like, get out. So I knew I had to protect. Like, I had that mama bear instinct, but it took a long time for me to actually feel that overwhelming sense of love and gratitude for this little baby. And that kind of, the memory of that makes me feel kind of, sad and guilty in some ways. But yeah, it was the only way I could cope at the time. So I wish I had prepared myself for that when things go wrong, to find the positives in that side as well. Um, yeah, yeah, and it was an ego death, because up until that point, I wanted something, I'd go get it, and I wouldn't stop until I could get it. And then just to surrender, and life just slapped me in the face so hard. Yeah, it was I really had to let go. So I let go of my business. I let go of my spreadsheets. um um and yeah, I guess I came from this, yeah, really, and I struggled with that masculine pull as well. Still thinking I'm failing. I'm not doing this. I had all these plans and nothing's come to fruition. And just being able to accept what is, and really
When
step in.
meanwhile you've like grown and birthed an entire human being.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it was just it was
Believe that.
yeah, it was just insane. It's just insane. Insane time. Yeah.
Wow.
But
It's
yeah, so it really made me go from one end of the pendulum to the other end. And I think I almost went too far the other way, where I went from being in control of everything to just an effort type attitude, like, whatever, I'm just going to go with the flow, but to the extreme where I just let go of too much. So it's
mm,
taken me a while to rebuild that and to find my confidence again,
yeah.
as a woman, as a businesswoman, as a mom, as a wife. Um, yeah, and find my way back to myself as who I am now. Because I think that was, yeah, I was very naive. It was a huge portal to step through. I guess the birth and death of, two of the most important people in my life. Yeah.
I mean, it's such a big story, and I'm so grateful that you came on here to share that, because it's like it I mean, it like brought me to tears, because it's like it's so tragic. But it's also so beautiful. It's like I often think about this. Like, I know actually a couple of people who in my life who have had someone really important to them pass and die, like really close to when their baby was born. And often I think those people think that like the spirit of that person is in their child. And I don't know if that's how it is for you, but I just how interesting, when we talk about death and birth being two sides of the same coin, it's like you really experience that. Like you really experience someone leaving and someone arriving. And wow, how that must have changed you and shaped you as a woman.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
wow.
It
But it
shattered my
happens.
entire belief system, really.
Yeah.
I had to reevaluate everything in my life. But for a long time, I was in this just black, hollow space where I didn't know where to go. Like, I just
Well, but
felt like
that's
my
where you
whole
have to be,
identity.
like, you
Yeah,
have to be in the black space for anything to come through.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Mm,
So it has definitely transformed me. I've become a lot more humble, a lot
mm,
more, I thought I was empathetic back then, but I really feel that a lot more now, that there's two sides, to every story, so three sides to every story, really. And everyone's going through something. Um, Whether you agree with someone or their values line up or they don't line up, we're all human. We've all had our own experiences. We've all had our own disappointments and grief and loss, and yeah, we're all on this journey, and yeah, it has been really humbling. It made me come to my work as well in a totally different way than what I wanted to launch back, prior to being a mama.
mm,
Um, yeah, so yeah, I feel like I have a lot more capacity to hold people and see people, in a deeper level than just the, average cappuccino type conversation where you're talking about the weather and whatever meaningless stuff. I don't have time for that anymore. I like going deep with people, and yeah, and especially the last few years as well, with all the scandemic and the lockdowns and the everything that's happened in the world, and the PTSD surrounding that as well. I felt like, when am I going to kind of break here? I just want to live a nice, happy life. But I feel like I'm coming out of that now, and yeah, I can't wait to be a bit more out there again. I think I hid away for a long time. Yeah, but I'm like re-emerging, almost like a metamorphosis as well, which is why we were talking about before about me changing my name a little bit too, so yeah, most people know me as Kat. My Polish family and my friends always call me Kasia. So
mm.
I had like these two different identities for a long time, one that most people knew and then one that only some people knew. And so I'm just guess I'm re-emerging and stepping into that new name as well, almost like taking on that new energy and that new power, and yeah. Yeah, hence the name Fertility Wisdom with Kasha. I'm just putting myself out there fresh.
I love that.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and I think sometimes, it takes that full pendulum swing from being the overachiever that I can do it all myself person to being like fully surrendered and fully letting go and fully, like you said, F it, to then eventually come to your middle ground. I think that life does that to us a lot. It like makes us
Mm.
experience the opposite extreme so that we can eventually find our middle ground. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
And in so many ways, I feel like for a lot of women in their late 30s, early 40s, I feel like in the community that I've witnessed anyway, so many women are going through that. It's like this time in our lives. And I think it's maybe that pre-sorceress phase,
Yeah.
perhaps, that mothering to pre-sorceress, because it is like this transition. It's not like an abrupt transition, like when you get your first your menarche, right? It takes a while to transition, and maybe that tapping on the door, I don't know, life's just throwing crazy, crazy hurdles at women at the moment. And it's making them go through again, like they're all going through a bit of a metamorphosis and just
Yeah.
finding out who they truly are and embracing it and letting go of old egos, and I guess the maiden as well, really, like, because our culture's so like, hold on to it, get that facelift and Botox or whatever.
Right?
And I think, yeah, just that really letting go of that, embracing the mother, but also knowing there's another phase just waiting around the corner. It's just blowing women's minds at the moment and just
Yeah.
blowing up their lives, to be honest. So, yeah, it's been a real, real eye opener
Wow.
this last decade or so. Yeah.
Well, I just think you're amazing. I think that to experience what you've experienced and be able to let yourself be in it, and then to be moving forward with the wisdom and how it's changed you, to truly let these really difficult and transformative experiences in your life to change you. have such deep admiration. Thank you so much for
Oh,
sharing.
thanks, Nat. Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you for giving me this space. I feel very blessed that you invited me in.
Yes, I'm so
Yeah.
grateful. I knew it
Yeah.
was a good conversation. Yeah, I mean, the last question I always ask, as I shared with you before we started recording, is if there's a piece of womb wisdom that you'd like to leave with the women listening, what might that be?
Mm, such a good question. I feel like there's so much. I think the womb wisdom that I'm really feeling right now is to embrace what is and, yeah, and surrender, lean into life. Surrender and lean into life. Not totally, but not to my extreme that I had, but yeah, just to we so want to put ourselves in these boxes and define ourselves in a certain way, and I feel like we just need to just yeah, we're okay. I think that's it. I think that's the womb wisdom is that you're okay and you're beautiful just the way you are, and yeah, it's a perfect design, God, the creator, whoever like has made you in this beautiful, perfect design, and there's nothing you need to change or um yeah, there's nothing you need to change. You're perfect. And just to be with that and that you're okay. You're going to be okay.
Thank you. Wow, I just fully received that. So thank you. Oh, well, yeah, Kat, I would love if you want to share where women can find you and about your new business.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so I am launching early next year. My business is called Fertility Wisdom with Kasia, and I take women through a beautiful course to take self responsibility, radical self responsibility, really, of their own bodies. So to reconnect with your body, to understand it from that sciencey point of view, but also that beautiful, whimsical point of view as well, where we go through all the archetypes, all the seasons, and just by really learning how to practically chart your cycle if you're wanting to conceive or as a natural contraception. Yeah, and how to live cyclically as well. So how to tune in and get your fitness right, get your diet right, get your day-to-day living, knowing when to do when to do podcasts or get on video, when to go out to parties, when to not plan, when to plan to stay home. But just fully embracing that superpower that we have, that ancient superpower that's always been within us, that
Mm,
was cut off from the neck down by the pharmaceutical system, and just almost like a new feminist movement is how I
yeah.
see it. So yeah, so I'm at fertilitywisdomwithkasia.net. And you can also find me on the socials, Fertility Wisdom with Kasia. That's Kasia.
Awesome. That'll all be linked below too.
Yay.
Oh, so much. This has been such an honor to have you on, and I've so enjoyed reconnecting with you and hearing your stories.
Yeah, you too, Nat. You're doing such a beautiful thing. And I love seeing your beautiful face and feeling your energy from afar, but still feeling it nonetheless. Thank you so much.
Thank you for tuning in to the wisdom of the womb today. It's truly an honor to bring these stories forward, and it would mean so much to me if you'd rate and review this podcast so that it can reach even more women. If you're looking for deeper support, you can find the link to book a one-on-one virtual session in the show notes. See you next week.